Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Dis Affamie History podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past, what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast. And if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you.
Well, when they come on to my podcast, it's more like storytelling. It's more like the oral histories.
Yes.
It's just so much fun to learn about.
To Dis Affamie History. And in today's episode, we have a very special guest, Ana Chavier, who is the founder and heart behind Tradition Café, and his work celebrates heritage, connection, and the food and family traditions that shape who we are and how we remember. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the role of family history and tradition in crafting identity, what it means to sustain heritage in a globalized world, and the personal inspiration behind Traditional Cafe podcast. So settle in, whether you're listening from your kitchen, your commute, or your community space. This is Dis Affamie podcast, so let's have a listen. What it is, and of course, what inspired you to create it.
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for having me on. I've been a long-time fan and not a first-time listener. My name is Ana Chavier Caamaño, and my heritage, my parents are both from the Dominican Republic, and they came here in the 60s. And I was born in the Midwest. We'll probably get into that in a little bit. But so I have a podcast called Tradition Café, where we talk about heritage and lineage, community, chosen communities. Yeah, it's just really interesting. It's more of a storytelling podcast. Hearing real people, everyday people stories, migration, it's funny. It's, a little sad sometimes, and I do stories from all over the world. I don't have like a niche country or anything. I've interviewed people from Scotland, England. One woman had heritage in the Benin tribes of Africa and the Taino in the Caribbean, and then Muskogee and Choctaw and all this stuff. So it's really great. I get to reach all over the world. It's fun.
No, of course that would be fun. And not only that, it's just because I've listened to your podcast as well, and it's just the connectedness. Like there's a lot of similarities between the stories of how people grow up. We just don't grow up in silos, whether we're from the Caribbean or we're from Asia or from Middle East, this type of thing. There are some certain similarities that really do connect us. And for you, what has it been like navigating life as a first generation Dominican in the United States? Like, how has that experience kind of shaped the way that you see identity, belonging, and of course home?
I feel like I have a really unique perspective on this because my parents came over from the Dominican Republic, and I was born and raised in Aberdeen, South Dakota. And so I like to tell people that I grew up on a 6-person island because it was just my mom and dad and my 4 sisters. And so I was pretty convinced that there were no other Latinos in the Midwest. There certainly wasn't in Aberdeen, South Dakota. I think that there's more there. I think that people have migrated there. There's a lot of people that have migrated to North Dakota because there's oil fields there. But for me, it was very strange because I didn't know the language well enough in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. But I was always very different in South Dakota. I wasn't Native American. I was brown of some other color, some other kind. So navigating that was difficult because I didn't really understand racism because it just was never a part of my life. I, travel back and forth quite a lot. It's a very unique thing to be Latino in the, a child of the 70s. In the Midwest. Yeah. Very strange. Very big culture mash.
And so on that line, and did you ever feel caught between cultures between DR and America, and how that tension showed up in your everyday life growing up?
For me, mainly it was a language thing. The language shaped that I didn't fit in on either side. I didn't know Spanish well enough to be Dominican, and I knew Spanish, so I wasn't really that accepted in South Dakota in the 70s. I mean, my friends now will say, "Oh, that's not true," but past, you know what I mean? I can't say that. But yeah, I think that the language thing is what I automatically jump to when somebody asks me about navigating or the culture clashes or stuff like that. There was also food. Our food is very different than what is from South Dakota, you know? I'm not sure that I answered your question.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Because I mean, I guess, my next question just kind of goes into this whole migration thing, right? And how, movement and how that related to your own family history, your parents moving over to America. And then, of course, you growing up in this kind of isolated area. How was that for you?
Interesting.
Or did they, or let's just say, or did your parents ever really discuss what that migration was like for them? Did they ever talk about it at all growing up?
Yeah, a little bit. My dad went to medical school in the Caribbean, and so then he migrated to Boston, I believe. And so, and then my mother basically escaped the Dominican Republic during the American occupation in 65. And so her last name is Caamaño, and her cousin is the one who started the revolution. So she had to literally dodge bullets. Like there were snipers on the rooftops in the neighborhoods, because I believe that her house was like pretty close to the police station that the rebels had taken over. Anyway, so that migration story of it's dangerous.
Yes.
You know, the reason why she had to dodge the bullets is because she went to get her visa to go to the United States. And then in order to get to the airport, she had to hide in a truck, in a military truck. So it's not easy migration sometimes. It's not just picking up and, getting your stuff on a boat to, or a truck. Yeah, so it can be quite traumatic. So then my mother and father had to marry by proxy because he couldn't come back to the Dominican Republic and she couldn't go to the United States without getting a visa. The only way she could get that is she was married. So it's complication when it's easier now. It should be easier now. But right now in this climate, political climate where we are in United States. Yeah, so they had to go through all of that. So my grandfather stood proxy for my father for the wedding. Okay, so I mean that's part of migration. So that is concerning. I'm sure that was very concerning for her family. But then they made it to the United States and then they migrated from Boston or Cleveland, one of the two, South Dakota, and decided to settle in the most opposite place in the world, from the beach to the tundra. So I grew up with a migrating mentality. Now I've got a sister in Zurich. I've got one in Minnesota. I've got one in Portland. I'm here in California, and I've got a brother in Boston. So I just kind of grew up with this migration history in my family, and my paternal side of my mother's family came from Spain, pretty directly from Spain. I think it was my great grandfather came from Spain to the Dominican Republic. And then my dad's came from France to like New Orleans to Martinique to, Dominican Republic. So there's just this very big history. I mean, as you know, with Caribbeans, we have a deep history of migration.
Yes.
And is it concerning? Sometimes. I mean, I think that if I had been, or has it affected me? It's affected me in a good way, in that I see the world as I can make home wherever I want it to be. So I'm fortunate,
Yes. Yeah.
because, I was privileged, and I wasn't dodging gunfire.
Definitely not. Like, I mean, wow, like, for her to, under the premise of her having to leave is just mind-boggling. There's no words to say, but I can kind of understand, because from what I have uncovered just within my own family, is that many people didn't leave under the greatest of circumstances either. Right. So, and usually that comes heavy, I guess, with some other emotions as well, of having to leave not in the best conditions. So,
Right.
with all of your, your migrations, when did you realize that, with the creation of your podcast, Tradition Cafe, that you wanted to create a space for conversations rather than just consume them.
It started very early on for me. But, like I said, I grew up with this kind of migratory idea of life. But my dad, I remember this specific. My dad would always say, family is the most important thing. They're the people who are always going to be there for you. So that has rung through my head for, 56 years. And and so understanding that I was a Latina in South Dakota, I didn't know any other Latinos. So I was learning all these other cultures. There were other families there that were, we had a lot of close friends, Chinese, Indian, Native American, Sweden. We built our own international family. And so, we would have these dinners where everybody would bring something, and it was just like this. I like to say it was a relief map of the world because I got to try so much stuff right from the beginning, right from the start of my life, and so when I grew up loving other cultures and learning and trying the food and wanting to go there someday, or so I had been thinking of something like Tradition Cafe since before podcasts were a thing. I didn't know that, I didn't know this was going to happen. This is amazing. So, God, I figured it would be just in storytelling, writing or something like that. But this is just such an amazing platform. That we were just for like 3 hours. But so I think that Tradition Cafe came from when I moved from Minnesota, which is very Caucasian, and I moved to San Francisco, where you can't walk 2 blocks without hearing like 3 different languages. It's just a beautiful thing. And we have such great food here. And so I got to meet all of these cultures that I grew up with. That it was very isolated, of course. In Aberdeen, it was a very small population of, those of us who are international. But now it's like it's like a kid in a candy shop. So as I started to talk to other people and ask, I started to get really nosy. Where's your family from? Who came over here? What was culture like for you when you came over here? How many generations back do you go? Have you researched it? I just got really nosy and really curious about people's stories. So when they come on to my podcast, it's more like storytelling. It's more like the oral histories.
Yes.
It's just so much fun to learn about people and their families and how that has affected their choices in life. Maybe they're, if they're Latino, maybe they raise their kids a different way than, their choices like that. Are they female from the Middle East? How did they decide about their life decisions? Just everything. And then there's chosen community too, which I love to cover because I just reached out to someone today, maybe I should say that, and hoping to have them come on because he's a member of the trans community. That's a chosen community. A lot of people will get kicked out of their homes and lose their family, if they come out of the closet, or especially today, come out as trans. Yeah. All of a sudden, they build this huge community of friends and what they call family. And it ends up being your heritage. Yeah. It ends up being, that history really well. You go back to, and you can talk about Stonewall and, I just love chosen communities too. Yeah. I just think it's really important that as well as, blood.
No, absolutely. Because what you're mentioning is about conversations, and not only just conversations, connecting to people, right? I know that you said you're very inquisitive to ask questions.
I said no.
It's basically, it's your way of connecting, right?
It's
your way of connecting to somebody else, trying to understand where they're from, and just seeing how potentially could there be, similarities of what you do to what I do as well in our families, right? So it's just one of those things. So we'll go back to, when you first started Tradition Cafe. Like, were there any fears or doubts before you launched? And
oh yes,
what got you through the mental block to push through?
You're assuming I am through it already. What got me through, I think, was I didn't go into it with this idea that it was going to be this huge success. I went into it with this idea that this is going to be more for me and, maybe my family will listen. And honestly, it started as a vlog, a YouTube channel. And I was going to cook my way through my mother's first Dominican cookbook. That was my first idea. And it would have been really funny. Not that great in the kitchen, which was the funny part. And I will still do it someday. But so as I started looking at that, that's when I really got the bug. I was like, God, this is fun to have a platform to do this and kind of research and, study. And it just immediately went into other cultures. And I thought, well, if I'm interested in this, somebody else might be too, you know? And so I was like, gee, I'll go on Spotify and do a search. And what is this stuff on me? I'm even kidding you. I'm not trying to butter you up. I found, I found, like we were talking earlier, our podcasts are some of the only ones that are hosted by Caribbeans. But, it just kind of encouraged me, to find these other voices, to find these other brown and Black people and, Asian and the LGBTQI community. Just to hear these stories that don't get told often enough, and I don't know why that is. But so that's kind of my idea with Tradition Cafe. Is my tagline is many voices, one table, because it is my desire, it is my dream to give everyone that I had growing up. So many different cultures sitting at one dining room table, talking about, their language, their culture, what is this called in the Dominican Republic? Well, it's called this in China, I just think it's really beautiful of an idea. And so I'm really putting my all into it. I love it. I can't stop.
No, and that's what it is. It's coming from within for you to be able to push this out there. And for, I guess we'll go on to what's tradition. What does tradition mean to you today, especially as someone bridging generations? And of course, what you mentioned, geography, so where people are kind of located.
Traditions. Oh, man. It's really great because I'm learning about so many new ones. I feel like, do you mean my traditions or just in general? Okay. Traditions, I feel like are, well, first of all, they're not held dear by everyone. It's a majority rather than a minority. Excuse me. Even if you just, believe in Santa Claus and you celebrate, with presents and stuff, that's a tradition. If you, make your mom's pastelitos on New Year's Eve, it's a tradition. You listen to salsa, that's tradition, and I think it just connects you to the family, and whether it's chosen or birth or, and it also helps you reach back through time. And if you reach back through time, you can find so much about yourself that you didn't know was there even. And you don't have to do genealogy research, to find that. You I don't know, listen to the music of your heritage or something, I just so traditions, I think, mean the world to me, obviously, or wouldn't have named it Tradition Cafe. Yeah, I think they're really important, and I think they're important to a lot of people.
Absolutely, because you mentioned it's reaching back, and as you said, not having to do necessarily genealogy, but it's through a different lens, whether that's through the food, whether that's through the music. It's just that connection to know that I'm connected to something or someone. That came before.
Yeah, and I think that one of the most beautiful traditions is oral histories. Whether you believe in chupacabra or not, somebody's telling the story for a reason. Grandma believes in, Taino symbols and what they can do, deities and whatnot. The oral history to me means family. The oral history connects that entire community and then reaches onward. I think that is the most important tradition of all.
And not only that, but the oral as well gives you it has your imagination thinking, right? And it has your imagination, especially when people describe what, whether that deity would have been for them, but it has you expanding in many ways, right? So I guess for you, and like for the conversations that you've had or some of the responses from the listeners, what reminded you that why this work matters?
Connecting to people that I didn't know anything about. I've got really great friends that I didn't know that, the Filipino part. I have a very good friend who I interviewed, and she's from Guam, but I swear we had never talked about it. Why? And so I think that reminded me, like, there's so much out there. There are so many different cultures that is going to make me so energized for this podcast, And yeah, that energized me and still does to this day to hear
Mhm.
people's oral histories, to hear people's, some of it can be so funny too. I just love hearing some of these stories. It's like, what? You did what in your culture?
Yeah.
It's so fun to learn about all these new things.
And so I guess, as we kind of, wrap up here, Anna, like, what do you hope that people walk away with after listening to an episode in Tradition Cafe, especially whether it's for first generations or many other
Mhm.
generations that, that are trying to kind of make sense of their own stories?
I think that there's a severe lack of, and this is again, I'm in the United States.
Yeah.
There's a severe lack of curiosity, patience, respect going on. I hope that, like I said, it's many voices, one table, because I really feel like I want people to walk away from Tradition Cafe going, that was really interesting. I need to know more. And I just think that that would do the world a great deal of good if we could all learn. And I'm just trying to spread that, spread that message. It's like, aren't you curious? Aren't you curious what they do in Morocco? What's their holiday, best, greatest holiday of the year, Yeah, I just want people to walk away with a sense of joy and curiosity and feel like they've learned something beautiful about another place in the world. So many people don't like to travel here. It's really
Yeah.
creepy. But, it's like, but you don't have to leave your house in order to learn about all these, how many channels there are, like
Yeah.
History Channel, Travel Channel, books, how about the internet, learning can be done from anywhere. And I
Yeah.
think that that's what I love about Tradition Cafe.
No, and it's great to hear other people's perspectives on things. As you said,
Mhm.
whether it's a recipe that someone is using whatever spices that you may use,
Yeah.
but they're using it in a different way. You know what I mean? Like, that's what connects us all, because we're not that far removed from each other if we're using, turmeric in a different manner.
Right. And I should say that the most common theme that I have found run through all the stories is how different cultures treat the elderly.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that, but I'm happy it came out. That is the most common theme I've found. Not just reaching back into your past or whatever. It's how communities, different cultures treat the stages of your life.
Yeah, definitely.
Interesting that that's what I found out, but I love it.
No, but I mean, it's an important one, because
Yeah.
sometimes it's not seen here, especially in North America, as something that's of value. You know what I mean? It's not seen something as of respect to be able to treat your elders in that manner. While in other cultures, it's definitely reversed. In terms of being able to the respect and valuing who they are as people.
Yeah, and I mean, back, it was always important. I don't know when it changed. To, you know, you look back at different Native American nations, and they were, the top of they were revered. Yeah, I mean, it's awesome that that's the main common theme. That's
Which is
heritage.
wonderful, which is wonderful. So, but no, thank you so much, Anna, for coming
You're
on,
welcome. Thank
speaking
you.
about your podcast, because it's very homey in the sense that you
Yeah,
you get to peep in and
yeah,
listen to a conversation, which is just wonderful to hear, because sometimes we miss that in terms of being able to have that connectedness. So it's wonderful that you're doing that. So thank you so
yes.
much for coming on and
Thank
speaking
you.
to it. It's been great.
Thank you. I am so inspired by your podcast, and thank you so much for asking me to be on. It's an honor. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much for listening to us, and thank you to Ana Chavier for sharing her journey of heritage, family, and tradition with us today. If you enjoyed today's conversation, you can learn more about Anna's work and the Heart of Tradition Cafe podcast at traditioncafe.com. And again, I will link all of this in the show notes. But be sure to follow us for more stories that celebrate Caribbean identity, memory, and resistance. Until next time, keep asking questions, keep tracing your roots, and keep telling your stories. I'm Wendy Aris. Thank you again. Peace and blessings. Ellen. Hoped you enjoyed this episode. And if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review.